It's like someone could speak 1,000 words a minute. It's like they say nothing. I think a great example of this is in an interview with Vice President Kamala Harris, where someone asked her, is it time to change the way that we're handling COVID? And she said,
it is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day. Every day it is time for us to agree that there are things and tools that are available to us.
What the actual hell are you talking about?
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its scenes while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more, people talking without speaking, people hearing without listening, people writing songs that voices never shared. No one dared disturb the sound of silence, and the people burn and prayed to the neon god they made, and the sign flashed out its warning in the words that it was forming, and the sign said the words of the prophet are written on the subway walls, in tenement halls, and whispered the sound of silence.
Wonder how many people I lost just in that moment of time. Good morning. So today I'm going to be going through an essay called The Sound of Silence. I came across Tom Ball's rendition of that song, and it allowed me to hear the lyrics really for the first time. I had, of course, overheard the classic Simon and Garfunkel. I think I might have only heard the version of it from clips of Watchmen, so I don't really recall whether or not I had ever listened to it, but I was definitely aware of this song. But running into his rendition of it, I was just captured by, one, his voice, but then the message that those words portray. I was really gripped by them. So I began accepting a challenge to try and face silence in a more direct way. Silence, I like to drive alone in the car in silence, but stopping, doing nothing, being okay with emptiness, letting a conversation rest, those are all challenging things that can beckon different terrifying aspects of our imagination, and I decided to try to face that head on. I know I'd mentioned a couple weeks ago I went on a silent retreat. That was a bit of an extension of that practice. It can be terrifying to sit there because you don't know what someone's thinking. An example for this, the risk of including the silent bit there is that people think that there's an audio mistake, or that they get bored or they get terrified and they move on. And that's possible, but there's still some things to be found there. And so I found myself repeatedly listening to this rendition by Tom Ball of the song, and I felt brave enough to pick up writing again. I had about 3 months where I wasn't writing. I was dealing with anxiety that was more prominent than I'd ever felt before, so I just couldn't get myself to do anything. And so I felt convicted, in a sense, to be okay with whatever that feeling was and try to explore it. And in that, I found something to write. So, and I've been writing basically ever since then. There was besides that 3-month hiatus, I've been able to write at least 1 or 2, sometimes 3 essays a month, and that's interesting to say the least. That I don't know if it was coincidental. I think that some of the depression and increased anxiety could have been seasonal. I don't know if it has anything to do with winter, but it's interesting that the timing of starting that exercise was also aligned with the timing of the reduction in anxiety and the increase of writing. So I wanted to share this essay. It's called The Sound of Silence, of course, and I hope that you can find, if you find yourself avoiding it, I hope this essay might encourage you to have the bravery to face something that you've been avoiding. The sound of silence. That which you most need will be found where you least want to look. Carl Jung. If you have ever been alone in the dark and found yourself surprised by an unrecognizable noise, you can remember the hundreds of images that flash through your mind. The rat, the snake, the dragon, the strange neighbor, your unlocked door, your neglected responsibilities. You struggle to maintain a semblance of rational peace, but everything that could be in the darkness manifests itself within a fraction of a second. You are no longer safe within the walls of your home. You have stumbled in a dark wood, and here, monsters are real. Yesterday, I listened to Tom Ball's rendition of The Sound of Silence on America's Got Talent. I found myself grounded in my seat, experiencing a deep sense of failure and judgment. Over the past few months, I have experienced a long-suffering form of anxiety. When I have nothing to do, a restroom break without a phone, alone time without Wi-Fi, a lull at work without a book, a drive home without a funny video. The silence manifested dragons. Often I could not bear it. Or, more accurately, I chose not to. The phone was the morphine for my demons. I knew they existed, but it was easier to sweep dirt under the rug than to scrub. Silence is the audible manifestation of darkness. Its presence beckons the same reflexes of our imagination, broadcasting all that could be into our minds. It is the Ouroboros, the infinite loop of potential. It is the snake that eats its own tail and the fire that burns everything down, simultaneously fertilizing the ground for new life. It is water, both the fountain of life and the swallowing storm. She is both the nurturing mother who prepares her child for the suffering of life, and the one who overprotects, capitalizes on, and thus furthers the handicaps of her children with her inability to limit her compassion. The Ouroboros is the snake that dwells in the garden, providing a path to consciousness and simultaneously cursing us with the understanding of the future, death, and thus introduces us to evil. It is no wonder that we convulsively speak, turn on the radio, or say goodbyes whenever a conversation incurs silence. You never know when the ground on which you stand will open up. Judgment Day is easier to run from than to prepare for. Only in death can we escape it. Darkness, silence, is the doorway to what could be. It is the new day dawning and the dusk of a long day's work. There is no avoiding it. Not really, anyways. Over the last 125 years, much evidence has accumulated over the curative effect of voluntarily confronting that which we fear most. What we do, when we do, we get better. The steps of courage need not be dramatic. Simply looking could be a start. When you stop running and look at the danger, it becomes something. He who must not be named is a shadow demon that kills children, tames basilisks, and corrupts loved ones at the same time. Voldemort is a person. A person is more manageable than a shadow. He who must not be named is invincible. Voldemort can be overcome. The best chance we have at defeating darkness is facing it, naming it, actualizing it. If we refuse to do so, we must simply hope that the angel of death passes over our door despite our lack of preparation. For this reason, psychologist Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Today, I have tried to face my fears and live out the vision posited by Simon and Garfunkel. I set my phone aside. I am trying to listen. The silence is dreadful, but I am finding I can face it. Today is the first time I have found the courage to write in 3 months. It appears the Dark Lord has a weakness in the quiet of rest and the whispers of the wind. This was written on, my computer jerked, March 6th, 2023. Yeah, listening to this, I had played this essay on my way here to refresh myself on what it was and put myself in a frame of mind to discuss it. And I was very happy with the essay. It was well written, but it was also, the message is for myself as much as it would be for anyone. Anything that you run from is anything that it could be. You don't know what it is. You refuse to face it, and so it can be. It could be a rat. It could be a crack in your foundation, and it could just be wind blowing against your home. But unless you pay attention to it and look at it, then all that could be is what it is, because the way you respond to it is as if those things were true. You run from it. You tell yourself, at least subconsciously, that you aren't brave enough to face such a thing. It's easier to avoid it. And this is why we don't talk about problems that we think will lead to a fight. It's why we fill the silence in a conversation. What if someone exposes the fact that I'm unknowledgeable, not as smart as them, a hypocrite, scared, incompetent? All of these things that could pop up in the imagination of the person with us. Well, we can hope to avoid it by not allowing their imagination to flourish and fill it with words that we don't even mean, starting a conversation that we don't even want to talk about just for the sake of avoiding that moment. It's not easy. Even being aware of it, it's not easy to change that. And I don't know if this is a struggle for everyone. I would venture to say that most likely everyone at least experiences it to a degree, especially if they know they're guilty for something. You can pick up extra chores, do extra goods, do extra services, try to impress, anything to distract the silence that could remind someone or give them the opportunity to notice that you've failed or sinned. That might be a universal, I would suspect. The absolute terrifying aspect of silence might not be for everyone, though. I have found that it's strange, because in the essay I had said I need a funny video. I haven't felt that need so much. I sense it sometimes on my way home from work or on my way there, but in general, the drive that I go through is completely quiet, unless I'm going through an audiobook, which is usually a discipline to maintain myself, educating myself, and other than that, I tend to enjoy the silence. And it's funny, I don't even notice it in the car. I'll have people, why is it so quiet in here? And then I realize that it's quiet. So that's interesting, because at least during driving, I don't notice the silence. But in a conversation, it's very noticeable, and I've been trying as hard as I can to not say words that I don't mean, or that aren't true, or aren't built on a premise that is true. And that's very hard to catch. But I know when I become uncomfortable with silence and I try and scour for anything to talk about just to avoid it, it's unlikely that that's something that I actually want to talk about, whatever it is that pops into my mind to continue the conversation, or at least start a new one. As long as I can just avoid the silence, most likely that conversation in and of itself at least starts on a false premise, which is a premise that, hey, I want to talk about this. Let me introduce this and see if we can explore this idea together. And that isn't true. The actual truth is, in that moment, that I might ask, how's the family, or how's school? It might be coming from an absolute dread of silence. And I am trying to work on not doing things that are dishonest, and it's a work in progress. The words of this song are wonderful. I found almost a yin and yang version. I don't know if two opposing views of the same words. On one end, people hearing without listening, people talking without speaking. On one aspect, I could see examples of that type of conversation that I just mentioned, where I don't know if you've ever done this or been a part of a conversation with someone where absolutely everything that this person says is void of any meaning or any life. It's like someone could speak 1,000 words a minute and it's like they say nothing. I think a great example of this is an interview that is with Vice President Kamala Harris, where someone asked her, is it time to change, the way that we're handling COVID? And she said, it is time for us to continue doing what we have been doing, and that time is now, and it is always that time. And you're just like, what the actual hell are you talking about? You could just see that she has 1,000 little voices over her that are just like, do not say anything against the narrative, or don't say anything against your boss or anything. She was so trapped in whatever political nonsense that she works with, or in her own mind. It could be entirely internal rather than externally imposed. But she was not willing to say a single word, but had to speak. So she spoke a bunch of nonsense. And so when I heard the song, people talking without speaking, it reminded me of that, or people hearing without listening. And you can have a conversation with someone, and analogous to the Kathleen Kennedy interview with Dr. Jordan Peterson, he would say something and say that our nervous systems are so old that lobsters respond to SSRIs like humans do for depression. And she would say, so you're saying we should organize society in the form of lobsters? Which is, it's like you aren't even close to listening if that's the conclusion that you had. And moments like that are often very saddening. But the opposite view that I came to notice was probably more along the intended version of what this song had, which is embracing silence. So people talking without speaking, you can say so much with just being restful and being okay with someone and not being uncomfortable. It reveals at least a state of mind within yourself that you do not require filling the void with something meaningless. And then on top of that, most likely it reveals something about your relationship, that you could trust someone with that type of silence. And so people talking without speaking, thousands of them together, and they didn't need to say a word. They could find the beauty of existence without filling it meaninglessly. And people hearing without listening. I don't know quite how to attach meaning to that one, but it was interesting to find two dichotomous opposing views of this song at the same time, which I think poetry can often do wonderfully. Great poetry can do this, great stories can do this, where the same action can mean a different thing, and it's a wonderful thing to experience if you notice it. And I think that it was a good thing for me to notice. And of course, Tom Ball's voice is wonderful. Definitely deserved the golden buzzer. May have deserved the victory too. But I hope that these words may encourage you to embrace that silence. Embrace the darkness, or face something that you know you need to. Perhaps you need to argue with your spouse. Perhaps you need to stand up for yourself and face the fact that you're going to do it badly for sure. If you've been avoiding it, you're not going to be able to argue well. If it's with your spouse, you're going to suck at it. If it's with your father or your mother and you need to tell them to go to hell, respectfully. But sometimes people need to be told to back off and to respect a boundary. You're going to do it poorly, most likely, unless you're lucky, unless you're fortunate. But that's okay. Hopefully, at least the fact that you stood will give you some form of respect. And then perhaps the opposite challenge. Maybe you can learn to be quiet. Maybe you don't need to share your opinion. And you can learn to be okay with being in the room with people that disagree with you. At least you might enjoy stronger friendships that way. So I hope this challenge is something that you can find useful, and I hope you embrace it and find something meaningful for your own life. I'll talk to you guys next week.